Hey you geeks! Amazon dropped its long-awaited teaser for The Rings of Power yesterday.
A wizard is never late, Frodo Baggins. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.
Something they noticeably did not do for The Wheel of Time last year. I'm interpreting this as a good sign. Amazon recognizes the show's quality and is confident that people will like it, more so than people would like The Wheel of Time. This teaser and the accompanying Vanity Fair article have raised a few questions about Galadriel, the Elven Princess, Khazad-dûm, Izildor, Aragorn and Bronwyn, small folk, and timing, which I will now address. This video will cover all the released info I could find, including the source material. Some people call it spoilers, I call it fair game, and you have been warned. Galadriel. We'll start with warrior Princess Galadriel. While this is not how I envisioned Galadriel in the First Age, it's not contrary to canon. As Tolkien wrote of Galadriel in her youth, she was a leader in the rebellion against the Valar, the angelic guardians. At the end of the First Age, she proudly refused forgiveness or permission to return. Galadriel was then of Amazon disposition and bound up her hair as the crown when taking part in athletic feats. Amazon promises to show us a very young Galadriel. The first 2 episodes will apparently serve as a 3-hour-long prologue detailing the events of the First Age. Disproving my theory last video about this screenshot, but I still think we'll see tree shrinkage. The first episode is called Shadow of the Past. Basically the title of the chapter where Gandalf tells Frodo all about the One Ring in Fellowship of the Ring.
Drop the, just Facebook. It's cleaner.
Thus, it's not surprising that we'll find Galadriel by episode 2 adrift, literally and figuratively, until she's struggling for survival on a raft in a storm-swept sundering seas, alongside a mortal castaway named Halbrand, who is a new character introduced in the show. Galadriel is fighting for the future. Halbrand is running from the past. At first, I thought Galadriel's shipwreck would be the wreck of the Noldor sailing from Valinor to Middle-earth, but that was exclusively an elven enterprise. So how would this Halbrand fellow get there? If not then, when else does Galadriel ride on a boat?
I'm on a boat! I'm on a boat!
I think we'll see the Valar banning mortal men, and Galadriel in particular, from entering Aman, the Undying Land, by having her try to sail there. I think we see her climbing the cliffs of the Undying Lands in the trailer, but I have no idea what that monster is. Using long sailing segments to tell important backstory is one of the very few sailing tropes I actually like. Another one I like, which fits nicely into this theory, is the gods rejecting the unworthy from landing in paradise.
They got hit by a thunderbolt before they got there.
This would also count as a Divine Comedy homage, a good 4 seasons earlier than I expected. This arc would be a very loose adaptation of the Silmarillion's history, but I would give it serious props. We could see the Valar issuing the famous test for Galadriel, which she doesn't pass until the Third Age.
I pass the test. I will diminish and go into the west.
Warrior Princess Galadriel holds great potential, and I'm excited to see it play out. But if she loses her powers in the season 1 finale, I will flip a table. Elven Princes. Not much is known about the Elven Princes in the show. We see Golden Boy in the trailer, who I think has been confirmed as Gil-galad. We do know there will be the Elvensmith Celebrimbor, as his skill with metals and magic lead to the forging of the rings, and a canny young elven architect and politician named Elrond will rise to prominence in the mystical capital of Lindon. That seems to be Elrond looking rather determined, if not canny. It would be nice to have a story about a good person who is also skilled at diplomacy. It's all too common, especially in darker fantasy, to have the good people be utterly naive. Khazad-dûm. The show promises to show us Moria in its glory, as it was under Durin III, who reigned in Khazad-dûm, while the rings were being forged next door in Eregion. The trailer is quite stingy on dwarves. Durin III, according to Appendix A, received one of the 7 dwarven rings, and his ring bred gold. The ring was believed to be the first of the 7 rings forged, and that it was given to the king of Khazad-dûm, Durin III, by the elven smiths themselves and not by Sauron. Tolkien shades the tale of dwarven rings with 3 alternative stories, so the show has plenty of latitude for the story of Durin IV, the Prince of Khazad-dûm, and the fair Princess Disa. Disa's name seems to be inspired by Thrain's daughter Dis, sister of Thorin, in a very Tolkiensian fashion, though her publicity has been centered around her appearance. Sophia Nomvente has a scene-stealing role as a dwarven princess named Disa, the first black woman to play a dwarf in a Lord of the Rings movie, as well as the first female dwarf. Vanity Fair seems to have forgotten the female dwarves in the Hobbit movies extended edition, but I too like to forget about the Hobbit movies, so I can't blame them. Disa is not the first dwarf of darker complexion to be depicted in Middle-earth. That distinction goes to this guy on the cover of the Book of Lost Tales 2. The dwarves were a people literally made from stone, so it follows that a few forefathers were carved from a particularly dark marble. Izildor. I'm very intrigued by Amazon's take on Izildor. We only see his home port of Numenor in the teaser, and it looks very nice. From the article and poster, he seems like a simple sailor. Another storyline will follow a sailor named Izildor, years before he becomes a warrior and cuts the soul-corrupting ring off Sauron's hand, then falls victim to its powers himself. This is very different from the hero we met in the films.
That Isildur, son of the king, took up his father's sword.
In Numenor, Isildur's family were the Lords of Andúnië, members of the Council of the Scepter, chief counselors to the King of Numenor, and the second most honorable lords in the kingdom. So maybe Amazon is going the grunge Aragorn route to nobility.
This is no mere ranger.
No mere sailor, that is. It worked for Aragorn, although it was considered a questionable adaptation choice at the time. Speaking of questionable adaptation choices, Aragorn and Bronwyn. Let's address the most contentious original storyline. One original storyline centers on a Sylvan elf named Arondir, played by Ismael Cruz Cordova, who will be the first person of color to play an elf on screen in the Tolkien project. He is involved in a forbidden relationship with Bronwyn, a human village healer played by Nazanin Boniadi, a British actor of Iranian heritage. Bronwyn is also a single mother, making this the most self-inserty fanficky type of story. I mean, who hasn't written a story, or at least imagined one, about themselves falling in love with a Tolkiensian elf?
Come on, let me have a show of hands.
To that end, the show will be competing with the typical fangirls D&D fantasy. The Keely and Tauriel relationship faced the same hurdles in The Hobbit and did not overcome them. Unlike Keely and Tauriel, who blew canon out of the water, the show seems to be exploiting a loophole. The elves far back in the Elder Days became divided into two main branches, the West Elves, the Eldar, and the East Elves. There were 3 unions of the Eldar and the Edain, Luthien and Beren, Idril and Tuar, Arwen and Aragorn. Thus the show's having a Sylvan or Eastern elf fall in love with a human is not contrary to canon. Notably, Appendix A's list disregards the pairing of Mithrelas, a Sylvan elf, and Imrezar, a Númenórean from the Third Age. This loophole gives a good basis for Cordova's casting. The discussion around this casting choice at best sounds like this.
You should be ashamed of yourself. You're no elf. You're an elvish impersonator.
Tune in next time to hear Amazon say,
Oh, right. Like you're a real elf. Give the guard a bow and arrow and he's a real elf.
Arondir is of course pretty enough to be an elf. He has a bow and sick arrow-grabbing skills. Tolkien wrote that men who live in the South have darker skin. So it also makes sense for the elves of the South to be darker as well. Bronwyn's village is called Tir Harad. Harad is the southernmost known Middle-earth kingdom, and Tir means to watch in Elvish, as in Palantir or Hyramentir, the highest mountain peak in southern Aman. Amazon has named this town Harad Watch, inferring it will be within sight of the Haradian border. So the warm southern aesthetic makes sense. I just hope they pull this relationship off better than Jackson.
If this is love, I do not want it.
Small folk still seem to make up the heart of this tale of the Second Age. I believe it's one of the Harfoots we hear narrating the trailer.
I can feel it.
For little people, we're getting 2 lovable, curious Harfoots, played by Megan Richards and Markella Kavanagh, encounter a mysterious lost man whose origins promises to be one of the show's most enticing enigmas.
This only goes to show what little people can do.
Timing. With the official blurb claiming the show will focus on Sauron forging the Rings of Power, I was very surprised to see character posters for Elendil and Pharazôn. Although the article clarifies that Pharazôn is not king yet, I was still baffled. According to the official Tolkien timeline, the Rings of Power were forged in year 1500 of the Second Age, the 3 rings in 1590, and the 1 ring in 1600. Pharazôn and Elendil aren't born until 3118. Looking at the show, I wondered.
The appropriate question is, when the hell are they?
I was both afraid and intrigued at the notion that they were going to attempt parallel timelines like The Witcher Season 1 tried, and failed. Then Vanity Fair clarified. Payne and McKay have compressed events into a single point in time. It is their biggest deviation from the text, and they know it's a big swing. We talked with the Tolkien estate, says Payne. If you are true to the exact letter of the law, you are going to be telling a story in which your human characters are dying off every season because they're jumping 200 years in time. And then you're not meeting really big, important canon characters until season 4. I would have been totally fine with that setup, but I see the appeal of overlapping the events of the 1500s with those of the 3000s. Thus, I think they will combine Sauron's defeat by the Númenóreans in year 1700 with Sauron being taken prisoner by Tar Pharazôn in 3262. The trailer teases some conflict between elves and goblins, but that could be a First Age flashback. I'll be looking for how all these arcs work together towards the Second Age's most pivotal moments as a touchstone of their adaptational quality. Overall, the deeper I dig into Tolkiensian lore, the more I find to support Amazon's creative decisions. True, it's not perfect, but there is a certain attention to detail that gives me hope. They might just pull it off. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you would like to see more. Your patronage is greatly appreciated.